Helping people understand history and how it keeps repeating itself. The brainwashing of people, we're here to unhypnotize. Open your eyes and mind. See how you can be the change. Topics include MKO to Plato, or allegory of the cave. Montauk Project Mandela, problem with using labels and other topics that are considered conspiracy theories.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Back to Light. Tonight, we're diving into the quiet but powerful psychological tension that shapes how we think, what we believe, and how we respond when those beliefs are challenged. It's that internal discomfort that appears when ideas, actions, or values no longer fully align, and how the mind works to resolve that clash, often without us even noticing. As we go into this, we'll look at what drives that resistance to contradiction and why it can be so difficult to simply change our minds, even in the face of clear opposing information. And now I present Article 7. First articulated by Leon Festinger. Cognitive dissonance describes the psychological tension that arises when an individual holds two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or behaviors at once. This tension is often experienced as acute discomfort, prompting a drive for resolution. When actions conflict with convictions, the strain can manifest as stress, anxiety, irritability, or deep emotional disturbance. At its core, cognitive dissonance reflects the human need to preserve a coherent sense of self. Festinger captured this resistance with clarity. A man with a conviction is a hard man to change. Faced with opposing views, individuals rarely respond with openness. More often, they dismiss disagreement, question evidence, or reject logic outright. This is less a failure of intelligence than a defense mechanism. The mind protects its existing framework because dismantling it can feel destabilizing. Cognitive dissonance exposes a central truth. We are not purely rational beings, but emotional ones who rationalize. Everyday life offers clear illustrations. A person may advocate for animal welfare while continuing to consume animal products, producing guilt that is managed through justification or avoidance. A smoker may acknowledge the health risks, yet continue the habit, downplaying the evidence or deferring concern to the future. Someone who values financial responsibility may accumulate debt, rationalizing it as a necessity or exception. In each case, the individual does not immediately change behavior. Instead, they adjust beliefs, minimize consequences, or compartmentalize actions to reduce discomfort. The dissonance is not resolved, only contained. On a broader scale, the phenomenon becomes more consequential. When individuals encounter information that challenges trusted institutions, belief systems, morals, or public narratives, the psychological stakes rise. Trust in authority often forms part of an identity. When that trust is shaken, be it through perceived inconsistencies, failures, or conflicting claims, the resulting dissonance can be profound. Some individuals reevaluate their positions, but many reinforce them, rejecting new information to maintain stability. This is why deeply held beliefs often persist despite mounting contradictions. The same process unfolds in reactions to public figures. When admired individuals face serious accusations, the emotional response can include disbelief, denial, anger, or grief. The stronger the prior admiration, the sharper the internal conflict. Some resolve this by rejecting the allegations outright. Others reassess their trust entirely. Similarly, in periods of widespread uncertainty or crisis, conflicting messages from authorities, media, and experts can intensify dissonance, leading individuals either to question prevailing narratives or to cling more tightly to them. In all cases, the mind is attempting to reconcile competing realities. Cognitive dissonance, therefore, offers a framework for understanding resistance, belief formation, and social division. It explains why facts alone rarely change minds, why debates harden into camps, and why identity often outweighs evidence. Awareness of this process does not eliminate it, but it creates space for reflection. It invites individuals to examine not only what they believe, but why and how they respond when those beliefs are challenged. When confronted with contradiction, do you investigate or instinctively defend your position? Do you apply equal scrutiny to information that confirms your beliefs as you do to information that challenges them? When does commitment to a viewpoint become resistance to truth? Are your convictions grounded in careful evaluation or sustained by habit and emotional investment? What assumptions have you accepted without question and why? And if confronted with undeniable evidence, would you be willing to revise your beliefs, or would the cost of your sense of self feel too great?
Cognitive dissonance is the psychological discomfort that we feel when our mind entertains two contradictory concepts at the same time. For example, I should smoke because I enjoy it. And I shouldn't smoke because it causes cancer. When the concepts have ethical implications, this discomfort is called moral dissonance or ethical dissonance.
Growing up Catholic, I think, and holding this value, the value of life so sacred, but also going to a combat zone. I have a duty to the country. And I also have a duty to myself as a person who believes in the value of life.
Almost all people except psychopaths have a mental picture of themselves as ethical people. But sometimes people find themselves acting in unethical ways. This creates cognitive dissonance. The important thing is how people resolve that moral dissonance. For example, suppose you think of yourself as a good person, but your boss asked you to mislead customers about the reliability of your company's new product. This situation creates cognitive dissonance that is psychologically and emotionally uncomfortable. In this context, the dissonance seems to manifest as guilt, an unpleasant emotion that you wish to resolve. Now, some people will react to this dissonance by refusing to mislead customers, opting to resolve the conflict by acting honestly in order to preserve their self-image. Unfortunately, many people will resolve the dissonance without doing the right thing. For example, they may decide that product misrepresentations are not so unethical after all, because, well, customers should be able to look out for themselves. Or they may rationalize that they are only doing what they've been ordered to do, So, it's someone else's fault. Or they may try to learn as little as possible about the product so that they can view their misrepresentations as innocently ignorant rather than intentionally dishonest.
So I like to think of myself as someone who's very responsible with academics. I go to class, I show up, I complete my assignments. But every once in a while, I decide not to go to class. So sometimes I'll tell them I'm not feeling well or some other excuse that may or may not be completely true. So that's definitely an ethical issue and it's something that brings me a lot of guilt afterwards. But then I also do a lot of rationalizing of it away and thinking, oh, everyone does it. It's not a big deal.
Professor David Luban has noted, in situation after situation, literally hundreds of experiments reveal that when our conduct clashes with our prior beliefs, our beliefs swing into conformity with our conduct without our noticing this is going on. In other words, too often we remind ourselves that we are good people and conclude that what we are doing must not be bad because we're not the kind of people who would do bad things.
Hello?
The human ability to rationalize, or in other ways, distance ourselves from our bad acts, sometimes seems unlimited. And unfortunately, we can quickly begin to see our wrongdoing as acceptable.
It's just where your brain goes. Your brain is trying to help you tell the easiest story.
I think some of the most common rationalizations are no one will know.
Well, everyone else does it.
I know I shouldn't do this, but it's for the greater good.
These things happen.
It's not illegal.
I think those are common excuses. I don't know that people usually believe them.
There are no easy answers to cognitive dissonance's potential for adverse effects upon our moral decision-making and actions. But here are 3 quick suggestions to help minimize or combat cognitive or moral dissonance. First, never ignore that guilty feeling you sometimes get. Stop and honestly analyze why you are feeling it. Second, study the many means our minds use to distance us from our immoral actions and guard against them. Third and last, get to know the most common rationalizations that people use to excuse themselves from living up to their own ethical standards. And let those rationalizations be a warning to you whenever you hear yourself using them.
I think everybody wants to feel like we make good decisions all the time, which can't happen.
You know, you want to feel better or good or positive about the decisions you're making. So
It's always easy for us to judge ourselves in a good way and rationalize the things we do.
But if you're aware that that's where your brain's going to take you, if you're aware that it's so easy to say, well, this is why I chose to do something, then you can be willing to take the time to say, okay, I know that's what's the fastest route, but if I'm going to reflect on this, how can I not rationalize? How can I not choose to do that bad behavior?
Tonight, we're stepping beyond surface-level psychology into the hidden machinery that quietly governs so much of human thought, behavior, and division. Cognitive dissonance isn't just an academic concept. It's the invisible force that explains why intelligent people can hold contradictory positions for years without collapsing, why relationships fracture seemingly obvious truths, and why societies can fracture along lines of belief even when evidence piles up on one side. Let's begin by understanding the raw emotional mechanics at play. When 2 or more incompatible ideas, values, or behaviors coexist inside a single mind, the brain doesn't treat it as a simple math problem to solve. It experiences it as a threat, a kind of psychological pain that registers similar to physical discomfort. This triggers the same stress response systems that activate during danger. You would have elevated cortisol, heightened alertness, and an urgent drive to restore equilibrium. The mind isn't merely uncomfortable, it's in survival mode. protecting the coherence of the self. This protection mechanism runs far deep than logic. Human beings are storytelling creatures. Our sense of identity isn't built on cold facts, but on a narrative that says, this is who I am, these are the principles that I stand for, and this is how the world works. When new information threatens to rewrite chapters of that story, the discomfort isn't about being wrong. It's about the terrifying possibility of becoming someone else. The self feels under siege, and the psyche will go into extraordinary lengths to defend its current chapter. Consider how this plays out in the quiet corners of daily decision-making. A person who deeply values honesty might find themselves bending the truth in a professional setting to protect a colleague or secure a deal. The immediate thought often sounds reasonable. It was a small white lie, or everybody does it. How about, it's for the greater good and it required it. But underneath, a low level of anxiety simmers. Sleep might suffer. Self-talk becomes defensive. Over time, the mind doesn't just excuse the behavior once, it begins reshaping the definition of honesty itself to accommodate the exception. What started as a single compromise slowly erodes the boundary until the value feels flexible rather than absolute. This process reveals something profound about human motivation. We are not primarily truth seekers. We are coherence seekers. The drive to feel consistent, worthy, and in control of our own story often outweighs the drive for objective accuracy. Psychologists have observed that this motivation is so powerful that people will actively avoid information that might create dissonance. They're going to seek out sources that confirm their existing views and even distort their memories of past events to make current behavior feel aligned. It's not laziness or stupidity. It's an evolved psychological immune system designed to keep the self intact in an uncertain world. Now let's expand into this realm of identity and belonging. Many of our strongest convictions aren't solitary beliefs. They're woven into the fabric of our social groups, families, political tribes, or professional communities. When dissonance arises from a challenge to these group-aligned beliefs, the stakes multiply. Admitting a flaw in the group's narrative doesn't just threaten personal consistency. It risks social exile, loss of status, or the painful restructuring of my people. The mind, sensing this deeper threat, amplifies its defenses. Rationalizations become more elaborate. Counter-evidence is scrutinized with surgical skepticism, while confirming evidence is accepted at face value. This selective scrutiny isn't hypocrisy in the moral sense, it's an emotional survival strategy. Think about how this dynamic fuels polarization in any charged domain, whether it's politics, science, ethics, or even culture. When two opposing camps from around an issue, each side experiences the other not nearly as mistaken, but existentially threatening. The mere existence of the opposing view creates dissonance because it implies, if they're right, then parts of my worldview, and by extension, parts of who I am, might be flawed. Rather than sit with that discomfort and investigate, many double down. They seek echo chambers that soothe that tension surrounding themselves with voices that reinforce the narrative and develop sophisticated intellectual frameworks to explain why the other side is not just wrong, but dangerous or deluded. What looks like stubbornness from the outside is often profound psychological self-preservation from within. This has massive implications for how we engage with public discourse and authority. Trust in institutions, leaders, even experts frequently become part of our personal identity. When those authorities display inconsistencies, shifting recommendations, failed predictions, or apparent contradictions, the resulting dissonance can feel like betrayal. Some individuals respond by engaging in deep, honest reevaluation, willing to endure the discomfort of updating their mental mode. Others, feeling the ground shift beneath them, reject the new information. They may accuse the source of bias, conspiracy, or malice. They may reinterpret the events in increasingly complex ways to preserve the original trust. Both responses serve the same underlying need to reduce the internal storm and restore a stable sense of reality. The tragedy here is that this defensive posture often prevents genuine growth. Real intellectual and emotional maturity requires the willingness to tolerate dissonance long enough to examine it rather than resolve it prematurely. It demands sitting in the uncertainty, asking uncomfortable questions like, what evidence would actually convince me to change this belief? Am I applying the same standards of proof to ideas I like versus ideas I dislike? If my core values were truly non-negotiable, would my current behaviors stand up to scrutiny? These questions are painful, precisely because they threaten the house of cards we've built around our identity. Let's go deeper into the long-term psychological consequences. Chronic, unresolved, cognitive dissonance doesn't simply fade away. It can manifest as persistent low-grade anxiety, emotional numbness, irritability, or even physical symptoms like tension headaches, digestive issues, or sleep disturbances. Over years, people may develop elaborate coping strategies, compartmentalization, projection, or moral licensing. While these tactics provide short-term relief, they often lead to a fragmented sense of self. The person becomes less integrated, less authentic, and relationships suffer because genuine intimacy requires consistency between words and actions. Self-trust erodes because deep down, some part of them knows their rationalization is paper thin. There's also a darker side when dissonance resolution strategies scale up to the groups or entire societies. History is filled with examples of collective belief systems that persisted despite mounting contradictory evidence. Ideologies, religious movements, economic dogmas, or cultural norms that demanded loyalty even as reality diverged. In these cases, the individual's need to reduce personal dissonance aligns with social pressure, creating powerful reinforcement loops. Dissenters are not just intellectually opposed, they become psychological threats to the group's coherence. This can lead to echo chambers, cancel culture dynamics, or outright hostility towards those who voice challenging perspectives. The group mind, like the individual mind, prioritizes internal harmony over external truth. Yet, awareness of these mechanisms offers a pathway toward freedom. Once you recognize cognitive dissonance as a natural, predictable response rather than a personal failing, you gain the power to respond differently. Instead of immediately reaching for rationalization or avoidance, you can pause and get curious. You can treat the discomfort as valuable data rather than an enemy to defeat. You can ask, what exactly is clashing here? Is this tension coming from genuine conflict with reality, or from an emotional attachment to a particular self-image? What would it cost me emotionally to revise this belief? And is that cost worth the potential gain in alignment with truth? This reflective stance doesn't mean abandoning all convictions. Healthy conviction is essential for a meaningful life, but mature conviction is held with open hands rather than clenched fists. It survives scrutiny because it has been tested, not because it has been protected from testing. It allows for nuance, for "I don't know yet," and for updating when better evidence emerges. Developing this capacity requires deliberate practice, seeking out thoughtful opposing views, journaling the emotional reactions that arise, discussing ideas with people who disagree in good faith, and regularly auditing your own behaviors against your stated values. On a societal level, understanding cognitive dissonance calls for more compassionate approaches to persuasion and dialogue. Shaming people for their inconsistencies rarely works because it heightens the threat to identity, triggering stronger defenses. Effective communication instead reduces that perceived threat. It offers new information gently, acknowledges the emotional difficulty of change, and appeals to shared values rather than tribal loyalty. It creates environments where changing one's mind feels safe rather than humiliating. It doesn't mean compromising on truth, but it does mean recognizing that human beings change beliefs through emotional safety and intellectual humility far more often than through blunt force confrontation. Let's explore the intersection with personal growth and self-development. Many therapeutic and spiritual traditions implicitly address cognitive dissonance without naming it. Practices life. Mindfulness meditation creates space to observe conflicting thoughts and feelings without immediate resolution. Journaling or shadow work brings hidden theories or beliefs into the light. Therapy often involves gently surfacing the gaps between ideal self and actual behavior, then working through the discomfort toward integration. In each case, the goal isn't to eliminate dissonance forever. That would be impossible in a complex world, but to become more skillful at navigating it. The integrated person doesn't fear contradiction. They use it as fuel for refinement. Consider the quiet courage required for this kind of inner work. It means being willing to say, "I was wrong," not as a defeat, but as growth. It means revisiting friendships, careers, or worldwide views when they no longer align. It means tolerating the temporary chaos of mind in transition. The anxiety, the grief for the old story, and the uncertainty of the new one. Many people never undertake this journey because the short-term discomfort feels too high. And yet, those who do often describe a profound sense of liberation on the other side, a lighter, more authentic self that no longer needs constant defense. I come up against this a lot with my clients. They say they want to change. We go through steps. We go through an action plan. They know simple steps how to break free and liberate their mind. However, they choose to sit in the discomfort. This has been one of the hardest things I've had to deal with being a coach all these years. Seeing the potential in others when they can't quite see it in themselves. They cling so tightly to their story and who they were, and they don't allow the space for who they can be. In our modern information-saturated world, cognitive dissonance has become more frequent and more intense. We're bombarded daily with conflicting narratives from news outlets, social media, scientific debates, ethical dilemmas around technology, climate, economics, and personal identity. Algorithms feed us tailored realities that minimize our individual dissonance, while maximizing collective division. The result is a culture where many live in low-level psychological tension without even realizing it, numbing the discomfort through distraction, consumption, or outrage. Breaking this cycle requires intentional media hygiene, diverse information sources, and the cultivation of intellectual humility. The willingness to say, I might be missing something, even when you feel certain. Ultimately, cognitive dissonance reveals both our vulnerability and our potential. We are creatures capable of breathtaking self-deception in service of emotional comfort, yet we are also capable of breathtaking self-honesty when we choose courage over comfort. The discomfort we feel when beliefs clash isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature that, when handled wisely, pushes us towards greater wisdom, integrity, and connection with reality. The path to light isn't the absence of contradiction. It's the willingness to walk through the discomfort of contradiction with open eyes and open heart. When we do that, we don't just resolve dissonance, we transform it into the raw material of a more conscious, coherent, and authentic life. To truly grasp the staggering reach of cognitive dissonance, we must move from the quiet chambers of the personal experience into the grand arenas of history, medicine, and collective crisis. Here, the stakes rise dramatically. When entire groups, professions, or societies confront evidence that shatters their shared narrative, the internal tension does not merely whisper, it roars. These real-world theaters reveal how dissonance can stall human progress, cost countless lives, and reshape civilizations for generations. One of the most haunting medical case studies comes from Vienna General Hospital in 1847, where a physician noticed that mothers in the doctor-run clinic were dying of childbed fever at rates up to 35%, while the midwife-run clinic stayed under 2%. He discovered that doctors were moving directly from autopsies to deliveries without washing their hands. When he introduced a simple chlorinated lime hand washing protocol, mortality dropped dramatically. Lives were saved by the thousands. Yet, the medical community recoiled. Accepting the evidence meant admitting their own unwashed hand had been killing patients. Their identity as healers was threatened. Colleagues ridiculed him, ignoring the protocol, and attacked him personally. He was eventually committed to an asylum and died in 1865 from the very infection he had tried to prevent. It took decades for his insight to be accepted. This Semmelweis reflex, the rejection of evidence, that threatened professional self-image still echoes today. A smaller, yet equally revealing episode unfolded in Chicago in late 1954. A woman named Dorothy Martin, known as Mary Ann Keach, received messages warning of a great flood on December 21st. A small devoted group quit jobs, sold possessions, and waited for a flying saucer to rescue them. When midnight passed and no spaceship, the dissonance was crushing. Instead of disbanding, the most committed members reinterpreted the failure, claiming that their faith had saved the world, and immediately began proselytizing to gain new followers. This case, documented by Leon Festinger in When Prophecy Fails, shows how high personal investment often leads people to rewrite reality rather than abandon a cherished belief. On a much larger scale, the Black Death that swept Europe starting in 1347 killed an estimated 30 to 60% of the population. The horror clashed with the medieval worldview that saw disease as divine punishment. Rather than integrate evidence of person-to-person contagion, many communities resolved their collective terror by scapegoating the Jewish community, accusing them of poisoning wells. Massacres erupted across Europe in 1348 and 1349. This was dissonance reduction at a societal level. Blaming a visible enemy restored a sense of moral order and control, even at a terrible cost. These examples show that when evidence threatens deeply held identities or group narratives, the drive for coherence can override reason and compassion. Yet, they also highlight the quiet victories of those who eventually endured the discomfort long enough for truth to take root. Think about how many times you have protected your beliefs. Which leads us into today's digital landscape. We see the same dynamic in the rapid spread of stylized propaganda, such as AI-generated Lego-style videos produced by groups like Explosive Media. These cartoonish clips turn serious geopolitical conflicts into playful, shareable entertainment with colorful plastic figures of world leaders set to upbeat music. For aligned viewers, they reinforce moral triumph. For others, they create sharp internal friction between amusement and discomfort at the oversimplification of real human cost. Many resolve the tension quickly by sharing it as just funny or dismissing it outright. Reflection invites a different response, pausing to ask what feels entertaining versus unsettling, and whether the playful wrapper makes us less willing to question the underlying story. Bringing every layer together reveals that cognitive dissonance is one of the most profound teachers available to us. It highlights the beautiful paradox of being human. We crave coherence, yet we live in a world of constant change and evolving selves. Reflection honors that aliveness. It frees us from constant self-justification and opens the door to authentic growth. We stop living as prisoners of old stories and start becoming active authors of more integrated ones. As we close this exploration and tonight's show, I invite you to carry one question into your week. Where in my life am I currently managing discomfort? What small, honest step could I take toward greater alignment? Perhaps a conversation I've been avoiding, a behavior I've been justifying, or an assumption I've never truly examined. May the awareness we've shared tonight continue to unfold within you, turning every day into opportunities for insight, alignment, and growth. I'd love to hear where you land on this. Drop your thoughts in the comments or continue the conversation in our Telegram group. We'll see you again next week, and if you found this of value, be sure to share it out. Let's spread the awareness. Thank you all so much for being here. A huge thanks to our mod Claudia, producer Carrie, and songwriter Todd, and to you, our listeners. Thank you for opening your mind. Remember, every story we believe shapes our reality. Stay curious and don't be afraid to question the narrative.
Only after the truth has come about, it walks into the room with lights thrown throughout. Can the minds of the sleeping and the lying about wake from their slumber to stumble on out of the mind control that has placed them inside rooms of deception the human brain provides. No place for logic in these darkened rooms. Common sense lost within the vacuum of construes, leaving no hope for rescue in this lying state. Rooms piling high with just more of the same. Unless, of course, the light of truth, like the break of day, finds its way through the keyhole of night, unlocking the way, opening the door for the dawning to be saved. That's what we do in this awakening and calling, locating room keys with names stamped upon them, and that one single truth which unlocks the minds of our brothers and sisters, one room at a time. Room service for the mind, one room at a time. Room service for the mind.